Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh Vissa along with Adam Schrader. Adam, how are things going in Austin?
Oh, Austin? It's good except for the lockdown, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty much the entire country.
Yeah.
And all of our homies and homegirls, homeboys, home trans, like you said, Adam, we don't discriminate against anybody. They're all at home right now listening to us.
Yeah, it ruined my perfectly good homeschool soccer day.
Well, speaking of homeschooling, that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about homeschooling, being a stay-at-home dad, and this episode is all about you because you've been a stay-at-home husband and a stay-at-home dad for 10 years now, and you've been homeschooling your children. Your kids don't go to public school. You've been homeschooling them, all four of them, since day one. So I want to get into that because all of a sudden parents around the country are also now homeschooling their children.
They're freaking out. My Facebook is freaking out.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and kind of the tips and advice you have for homeschooling.
So one of the things that's amazed me most about homeschooling is I never realized that if you stripped away all the other 25, 30 kids in the classroom and just sat down and did one-on-one stuff with your kid, it takes way less time than you think it would possibly take. Like kindergarten, you can knock out a day's worth of work in 40 minutes. You know, you can do reading, writing, math, and one other little subject in no more than an hour. You know, on days that you just do reading, writing, and math, maybe it's 40 minutes. And, it's steadily grown from there. Like I've got a fourth grader, first grader, and then pre-K. I don't do anything with the pre-K kids. They go to a preschool that they, play with friends and stuff, and they're learning to write their letters. But fourth grade, I'm doing at most 2 hours a day with him. And then first grade, I'm doing hour to hour and a half with him. So it takes way less time than everybody thinks just because you're getting the one-on-one time and not dealing with all the other superfluous stuff.
Well, that sounds a little familiar, doesn't it, Adam? Because comparing that to the corporate space, we already did an entire episode about how working in an office, you're there from 9 to 5 or 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day, but how much are you really working? Maybe like 2-3 hours of those 8 or 9 hours in the corporate environment. And so you're telling me, look, my son he's 2 months old. So this is kind of new to me. But when I was in school, I felt, I guess as a kid, I felt every minute was valuable. Maybe it was because I got distracted by women in high school or just looking at women in high school.
Well, just think about whenever you're growing up, how the teacher would ask if there were any questions, and there would be 10 questions from kids, but 5 or 6 or 7 of them were kids just asking her to repeat something or asking some question that, if you'd been listening they say there's no stupid questions. There are stupid questions. And there were kids who'd asked something that was like, man, if you'd been listening for even half of the time that the teacher was talking, you would know that answer. It's there. And especially one thing I want to say is that as your kids get older, especially if you have a kid who's third grade or older, it's kind of important, and it's something you can really impress on them at this time, that you can teach them and give them work and just let them go do it. Like we have these things that are called daily grams and daily science, and they're workbooks. And literally every morning, my kids eat breakfast, and I tell them, okay, go upstairs, brush your teeth, and do your daily work. And they will go upstairs, brush their teeth, sit there, and do their daily grams and their daily science, and they just let me know when they're done. And when they're done, I go upstairs and we start working. So it's a trust thing. Your kids don't need you as much as you think they need you.
You know what? I think this episode will just focus on the homeschooling aspect because this is just such a new topic for all of a sudden for a big chunk of the country.
Yeah,
now you said that
the reason I said that is I'm seeing all these posts on Facebook that have parents who are outlined, like there's this colorful chart that's like, we do this from 8 to 9 and this from 9 to 10 and this from 10 to 11, and it's scheduling it so hardcore, and they don't give their kids, they seem to think that they need to be there with their kid every single minute of the day, and you don't. You really don't. You have to trust that you're going to give them work and they can do it, and you have to trust that they're going to respond to you. If you treat them with respect and say you need to go do this, you have to respect them and let them go do it. And kind of what we talked about before a little bit is just you got to let them fail sometimes, because when they fail, if they don't get their work done, then maybe they don't get to go play, or their brothers or sisters are going to go do something fun. Maybe you let them play on the computer or watch a movie, and the other one is like, sorry, you haven't done your schoolwork, you're not going to go do it.
So my question for you now is, you said in a regular school day, you might be at school, a kid might be at school for 8-9 hours, just like in a regular work day. Well, now they're at home and let's say that they're done in 2 hours, or in your case, 40 minutes. What do the kids do for the rest of that time? You teach them more?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
I'm saying in general, the parents across the country, they're going to be facing this problem.
Yeah, so one thing that I do is I let them be bored. There's a valuable lesson to learn in being bored.
Agreed.
Whenever they get bored, they figure out what they want to do. So we have a playroom in our house that's actually a mess, and this week I'm making them go through it and clean it. And what they do is, whenever I'll say, all right, we've done 30 minutes of work, I'm going to go do this. You guys can do whatever you want. Sometimes they'll pull out a board game and play the board game for an hour. Sometimes they'll come downstairs and build Legos for an hour. Sometimes they'll just get a book out and sit there. Like, I've caught my twins, the preschoolers, they taught themselves to read, and they'll just sit there in the playroom reading books for an hour. I let them do their own thing, and they know the rules about what they have to stay in the house unless they tell us that they're going outside. But other than that, really, and they can't get on like electronics unless they ask. They know the rules and they just follow the rules. And I don't, I'm just going to sound kind of bad, I don't pay attention to them unless they need me. And if they need me, I come and help them with whatever they need.
That's every parent's dream. Yeah, that doesn't sound bad at all.
So let them be bored, let them figure it out.
Yeah, and that's a really important lesson that you brought up, because we talked on an earlier episode that transition going from corporate desk to home office desk. And I said the first couple of weeks, especially in my case, I was a single guy in my mid-20s. It was extremely difficult to acclimate to working from home because I felt lonely. I was talking to myself. I got bored. And guess what? I figured it out and I created my schedule. And so what you're saying is even a little 5-year-old can figure it out for themselves. They can read a book, or in my case, I brought up earlier, I read books, I watched movies, educational stuff. I worked out, went to the gym almost every day. Well, as a kid, you can do similar stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've got books, you've got, if they're too young for books, then give them a coloring book and let them go at it. I mean, I remember as a kid, I was kind of an introvert. I would lay on my floor and throw a ball up in the air and like make up a game, or see how far I could throw it, see if I could throw it and catch it with my eyes closed. I'd do that for an hour, 2 hours. Think about how often your kids come home from school and they're just wiped out and they don't want to do anything, but they have to do something because they've been given homework.
Yeah.
Well, now they have the opportunity to not do something. So, you say, all right, you've been asking to not do anything for, years potentially. Here's your chance. Get your work done that you need to do, and then, prove that you can deal with it.
What are some of the other questions or debates that you're seeing on Facebook with parents?
So one of the things I think that parents who have their kids at home need to think about is the public school system is not going to, I'm not a big fan of the public school system, obviously, that's why we homeschool, but they're not going to let your kid fail. They're not going to let the entire school system fail. They will figure out a way to get your kids where they need to be. So you don't have to be like grilling your kids and making them do drills, and it's not up to you right now to get your kids, quote unquote, ahead. You can if you want, but the school system is going to figure out a way to make it where your kid graduates knowing the things they need to graduate. I mean, they're not just going to let them fail. I mean, the system might fail them, but they're not going to let your kid fail the way the system's currently set up.
Yeah. Well, what's wrong with the public school system?
Oh, so many things. Let's see. So mainly to me, the biggest thing was we had two big draws for homeschooling. Number one was the fact that our kid, we like to let them kind of do their natural sleep pattern. And our kids, there are some kids who wake up at 5 or 6 a.m. every day. I was dragging my kids out of bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And that just, the idea of waking them up and getting them to school by 7:30 was just a nightmare scenario. And the second thing was, it's just the idea that there's so little time for play. I mean, kids learn so much through play. And in the public school, I mean, I went to they call it a kinder roundup, where you go and you meet the teachers potentially, and you can talk to the principal. I thought it was going to be like a time to learn about kindergarten, but apparently it's a time you like enroll in stuff. I don't really know. And they were talking about their day, and the kids got a 20-minute recess, maybe a 20 or 30-minute lunch, and then there was like craft time or some time you could play around in the room at the end of the day. So out of the whole day, they had an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and a half where they could play. And part of that was going to be eating, and the other part, the last 30 minutes, the teacher could take away if they wanted. And that just wasn't enough. I mean, you wonder why kids have attention deficits. It's partially because they're rowdy and they need time to play. I mean, kids, that's what they do. They've got all that energy, and you're telling them to just sit there. And then another big thing was just the pace that our kids needed to learn. There are some subjects that we blow through. Our kids have no issue with it. And there are others that, there are other things that they're a little slower with. Like my fourth grader blew through math until he got to division, and he was struggling with division, and he was struggling with multiplying by sevens. And so we took time, and we just stopped, and we worked on division, and we worked on multiplying by sevens. And I was able to do that because I set the curriculum. So, if there's a problem with a reading lesson or a problem with a spelling issue that they're having, you can stop and focus on that one thing. Like, we've gone weeks without doing, reading lessons because we're focusing on like learning about some science thing or some geography thing that they're interested in. And so it's the ability to kind of pace yourself and make the decisions of what you want to learn that I thought were the most important. And that's something that, if your kid is out of public school right now, ask them what they want to learn about. Ask them, what kind of things, if you weren't in school and you're at home now, but you have to do something, what do you want to learn about? And then make them learn about that. I mean, you can't go to the library right now because, every single library is closed down, but there's still the internet. There's still. I
was going to say library. Who still goes to the library?
Yeah, there's Kindle books that you can get from the library. You can log onto your library website and get Kindle books or whatever other e-reader you have. And no, I mean, library books. The library is very, very helpful. I mean, one of the things, my kids and I are actually starting our own podcast, and what we're doing is every 2 weeks, I make them tell me what they want to learn about. And so like right now, my kids, one of them picked George Washington, and the other one picked Nelson Mandela. And he only picked Nelson Mandela because he couldn't decide what to pick, and so I chose for him. And so we put a bunch of books on hold at the library, and so they sent them to the library closest to us, so I didn't have to drive around to 6 different libraries. And we went and picked up the books, and then every day I give them time, and I say, all right, go upstairs, read about your subject, take notes on it, and then at the end of 2 weeks, I sit down with them and we write a paper. Every 2 weeks, whatever they're interested in, we write a paper. And then they have to record themselves reading it, and then they have to edit their recordings, and then we're going to put it together and release it as a podcast. So, I mean, these are things that there's no chance they'd be doing this in public school, but it's something that I thought was important to get them some skills.
Got it. So you basically shared, I think the biggest thing that you like about homeschooling is the freedom that you have to,
Yes.
for you and your sons to wake up whenever, get started on school whenever, and make your own schedule.
I did actually make them start setting an alarm, because one of my first grader, if we didn't have an alarm, he'd sleep until 10 o'clock, and then we have activities we want to go to, and it was just a pain. So I actually made him start setting an alarm, and it's the bane of his existence. It's kind of like, yeah, wait till you're older, kid.
And the most common question, though, that people get is, or at least homeschooled kids and probably parents, you probably know what I'm going to ask already, Adam.
Yep, starts with an S.
Yeah, it does. So how are, homeschooled kids, like, how do they socialize? Don't they grow up to be kind of weird?
I think from when you and I were growing up, to me, homeschoolers were weird growing up. I don't know about your thoughts, but, homeschoolers back then were just odd ducks. But one of the things that's been really helpful since then is this invention called the internet. I don't know if people know about it, but it's been a blessing for homeschoolers, because there's
and
actually...
for you and me. It's been a blessing for both of us.
Yeah. I mean, there are actually so many activities that it's easy to not do school some days, or not do quote unquote school some days, because you're doing all these activities for homeschoolers. There are Facebook groups for pretty much every city that's like, there's Austin area homeschoolers where I am, and you can find things to do all the time. And it's actually, I like it because, like, we go to a homeschool soccer game, and my kids have to learn to play sports with a group of people that range from 5 to 72. There's a guy who comes out who's 72. He's actually pretty good. But there's a whole lot of kids that are in the 10 to 18 range who are out there playing. And they have to figure out how to play soccer and not hurt little kids and include the little kids in the game. And the little kids have to figure out, where they're comfortable playing. Because, like, my first grader, I tell him whenever the ball gets to the part close to the goal where he'd be a defender, I've told him just stay away, because when he's come in there, he's gotten scared, and he does better if he doesn't go in there. And so he's learned not to do that, and he's learned that the big kids are going to play harder down there, so he needs to play in, like, midfield and beyond, like attacking. And so all of these age ranges have to kind of come together and sort it out. There's a chess club we go to where, there's different levels of kids playing chess. And so my older kids, like my first grader understands it pretty well. My fourth grader understands it really well. And they can teach the other kids. So they're sitting there teaching kids their same age who haven't played before or younger. And so there's just so many things. And what I really like about it is the fact that there's a wide age range. And so, whenever you go to the workplace, if you're in a corporate job, you're dealing with people your age to, 70, 80 years old. There's not just one person there in the workplace. If you're working for yourself, you have clients who are all different age ranges, who need all different sorts of things. And when you're in public school, you're only around kids within usually 2 to 3 years of you. So it limits the people you're exposed to.
Yeah, and I should mention that I've been a private school kid my entire life, from preschool all the way through graduate school.
Yeah, you're too good for us public schoolers.
Private school. Well, I bring that up because now I'm very anti-private school, and to piggyback off your answer, it's just a different time now. The public schools have gotten a lot better. You have more option and choice when it comes to public schools, IB programs, magnet programs. When I was growing up in Houston in the 90s, you had to go to like two public schools. If you didn't go to those two public schools, then you had to go private. You had no choice because the schools were just that bad. And when it comes to homeschooling, I'm part of a chess club here in Tampa, and I go and play. I try to make it out every Wednesday night. And we have one homeschooled kid who comes with his mom every Wednesday. And I've seen him kind of grow up over the last 4 years. Yeah, 4 years. And I just wanted to let you know, but it's just funny because when we talk to him, he's homeschooled. So I guess he hasn't been exposed to other kids, and the way that he talks about other kids, like it's almost like he kind of talks down, like, oh, public schools, like people get into fights at public schools and they punch each other in the faces. Like that's a really bad place to be. And we just kind of laugh. And I hope times are different for your kids in Texas, but here in Tampa, he still fits that stereotypical homeschooled child.
Yeah, but I've met some of the kids in our neighborhood who go to the public school, and some of them are just jackasses. And so I don't mind kids not being around them, and it's nice to be able, and especially one of the things that I like is the fact that we're also meeting kids from all over the city. So, if we go up north, we live in South Austin. If we go up north, there are kids that he could play with. If we stay down south, we know people, if we go east or west. So, you meet people from all over the city as opposed to just in your neighborhood. So, it's nice. And I found personally, like when I've gone places and met kids, people say homeschool kids are weird sometimes, but homeschool kids that I've dealt with are so much better behaved and respectful than pretty much 98% of the public school kids that I meet. And I think a lot of that is the fact that they're dealing with kids and adults who are older than them all the time. And also that they're just not cooped up. And, when they get home, they just want to go crazy or sit around and not do anything because they're exhausted. So I think it's been a blessing in that respect.
Well, it's private school also. Private school kids can be jack. I guess everyone's a jack. But we grew up going to private school, some of the best private schools in all of Texas. And when people would bring up public school, the kind of our notion of public school is like, oh, public schools are bad. They're ghetto. People get shot in public school. It's like, oh, you go to public school, like you're deprived from life. And as I've gotten older, went to college, met people who went to public school from other parts of the country. My wife is a product of the public school system, and she's turned out excellent. And I'm a product of the private school system. And I just think like I brought up earlier, I'm anti-private school now because when you're in private school, you're so sheltered from the real world and from America, really, like middle America. And you just don't get that fully experiential learning. Learning isn't just in the classroom. It's not just at home. You have to go out and really see and understand the world. And I think you get that at least in a lot of the public schools today. And in homeschool, it looks like homeschool has changed a lot, like you said, from when you were in school to what it is now. It seems like it changed a lot, and the kids have a lot of social activity. And how often do your kids play with their friends or their
they don't. They'll go out and there's a couple kids down the street, and they'll go out and play with them. But there's a couple of homeschoolers in our neighborhood, and they go and hang out with them during the day. Or there's a parkour group who meets at the park on Monday mornings, and they go and play with them. And so, but playing with the public school kids, it's not as often, just because a lot of times, they have their after school stuff that they have to go to. If their parents are working, they have to go to the after school care, so they don't get home until later, and then they're exhausted and stay inside or do homework. And so, just think about when we were kids. I didn't go over to people's houses during the weekday for the most part. It was always playing on the weekends. So it's kind of nice to be able to do both with the kids.
Yeah, and I'm sure all the kids who are out right now these are all tips that their parents can utilize because unlike you who chose to homeschool, now all of a sudden millions of parents around the country are being forced to homeschool. And I think they're also realizing that maybe it's not as hard as they initially thought. Like you said, you can be done with a lesson in 40 minutes or 1 hour and you're done for the day. That's a common question that people ask. Like, you homeschool 4 kids, like, how do you have time to do that? Like, the teachers work so hard at this and that. Well, you just said, 40 minutes and you're done. That's it.
Yeah, it can be. And you can just do kind of a cycle. If you have multiple kids, you do work with one and then say, all right, go do this lesson. And then you teach the next one. And when you're done with them, you just keep cycling around. And I think it helped my younger kids learn because like my first grader, and this is one of the things that concerns me. We've actually told our kids once you hit 3rd grade, they can choose to go to public school or not. But I do worry that if they do go to public school, they're going to be bored because they're technically ahead in most every subject. Like my first grader just finished his first semester of 3rd grade math. Just because he's heard me teaching his brother, he loves math, and so we're plowing ahead with that. And so that is one thing that if you're teaching your kids now, don't push them academically because remember, they're still going to be learning this stuff when they go back to school. But there's so many other resources out there that you can that are free, so just go online, type in like homeschool curriculum, whatever subject you want, and something free will show up.
Well, one important point you bring up is teaching. And does your oldest, does he teach your other children?
No, we haven't started doing anything like that.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, I guess that is an option for parents if they want to be lazy. Just have the oldest kid do the teaching. In Montessori schools, that's what they have. They have the oldest kids teaching the other kids, whether it's Spanish or Mandarin or math or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of value to teaching. It reinforces everything you've learned.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. All right. Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to share about homeschooling or just childcare in general?
Yeah, the last thing I would say is just take the cues from your kid. Don't force it. If you're wanting them to do something, but they're fighting it, there's no need to force it. They'll get their education at school. They'll, one day they'll want to do 5 hours. The next day, maybe they don't want to do anything. Just follow their lead. Yes, you're the adult, but it's their education and you can trust them to kind of tell you what they want to do.
I have one last question.
Okay.
How did you do it with 4 kids? Because your 2 youngest are twins. So like when they were 1 year old, your oldest kid was like in school, right? Like 6 years old or 5 years old. How on earth did you do that?
So a lot of that was thankfully, I said that kindergarten didn't take much time. We would do it during naps. I'd put the twins down for a nap and then I'd get up and do, a reading lesson. And then if there was time, I'd have them do some handwriting. And then the twins would wake up and then eventually they'd go down for another nap. And I would do a math lesson with them. And that's the one-on-one quick lesson time that I was talking about there is, you can do something in 20, 30 minutes while the other kids are napping. And from the time that our kids were about 2 to 3, they were playing by themselves a lot. So like whenever Isaac, my oldest, was 2, we'd move back to Austin. And I remember he would just sit outside. I'd be rocking his brother to sleep. And I could look out the door and he'd be sitting there reading books, waiting for me to be done so that he could go downstairs and play. We've taught independence a lot with our kids. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. You can check out all of our previous episodes there at workfromhomeshow.com. Sign up on our mailing list, get a free copy of Naresh's book. And until next time, keep on working from home.